Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Now, today, guys, I'm super excited to have Ryan Hartwig here for a live chat. And I'm so looking forward to this. I just think it's going to be fascinating. Now, you may recognize Ryan. Oh, hang on. There we go. You may recognize Ryan as the Project Veritas insider at Facebook, or one of the Project Veritas insiders, where, if you watch Project Veritas like I do, I'm glued to my screen whenever those videos come out just to see what they uncover. Ryan was good enough to go undercover and got some really fascinating footage of his time working for Cognizant, which does work with Facebook. So let me just read his bio so everyone knows who we're talking to. Well, at Cognizant, doing work for Facebook, Ryan Hartwig was targeted because of his conservative political beliefs. When he shared a link to an LA Times article of a peaceful protest he took part in, he was given a written warning. And we will definitely be talking about how HR handled that. For those who didn't know him at work, he was rumored to be a racist Trump supporter. However, those who got to know him appreciated his caring personality and his concern for his coworkers. Ryan's insight into conservatism brought value to Facebook. When Facebook requested content moderators to flag right-wing extremism, he was able to flag that content and send those posts to the client. In late 2019, when Boogaloo was trending during the impeachment trials, Ryan raised this trend to his supervisors and subsequently to Facebook. Ultimately, after noticing many such trends that favored liberal viewpoints and banned conservative ideologies, Ryan wrote a letter to several congressmen, congresswomen, and senators. After no response, he reached out to Project Veritas to expose the blatant bias and misconduct he had witnessed. And in the description below, I have linked to Ryan's Twitter page so you can follow him online. I've also written to an article that he wrote so you can get some more information. Ryan, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Carlin, and I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. Yeah, as you heard in the bio, a lot of crazy things happened while I was working as a content moderator at Facebook, and the video went live. I went public about 3 weeks ago. It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So in the last 3 weeks, I've done at least 20 media interviews. I interviewed in Spain and Canada about a lot of different things, including election interference. So yeah, I hope we can have kind of a free, kind of a casual conversation here. If there's any comments, guys, in the comments below, ask, and I'd love to talk to you about any questions you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, make sure you send in those questions. If you have them, I will be keeping track. Of course, as always, I will be taking questions from my locals community first that has already contributed their questions, but I will definitely try to get to as many questions as we can. So Ryan, I kind of just want to start. I want to start at the start, which is a very good place to start. Yeah. And I want to talk about how you ended up working for Cognizant/Facebook.
Yeah. So I started at Cognizant in March of 2018. So prior to that, I was working as a security guard for about 6 months, kind of in between big jobs. And I found a job posting about being a content moderator for social media. I didn't mention Facebook at all. So I applied. I got the job. I was hired as a bilingual content moderator for Spanish and Latin America. So yeah, from the very beginning in March of 2018, I noticed a few things were off. Like in my training, my first 4 weeks of training, my trainer was very open about her politics, and she was talking about how Obama is her patronus charm and would always, speak positively about Obama. And so, yeah, I noticed a lot of just little things here and there that added up to a lot of things. And so that's when I started, March of 2018, and then Cognizant ended the project prematurely on, in this past February. So I was there for just under 2 years.
Okay. And what were you expecting when you started that job?
The expectations, there weren't too many expectations. I always like to use my Spanish, so I was glad I got to use my Spanish. Before they told you it was Facebook, they showed you images of what you would see on a daily basis, like anime porn, graphic violence, like beheadings, things like that. So they let you know from the get-go, like what you were getting into and if you were okay with that. So those are some of the expectations, but beyond that, I really didn't know. But, on a daily basis, you'd see maybe, you'd see memes. There's a lot of memes you'd see. You could see child pornography, human trafficking, which maybe we'll get into with the whole Wayfair scandal trending right now. But yeah, those are some of the expectations. Didn't really know what I was getting into, to be honest.
And so when you started at Cognizant, what was kind of the first inkling to you that there might be more of a bias toward censoring conservative speech than otherwise?
Yeah, so early on, there was a post at one point. Videos of like people dying was, I think it was an outright delete taken off the platform. And so in April of 2018, there was a video of an Israeli sniper shooting a kid or shooting someone. And so they made an exception to allow that video on the platform. And then that same summer in summer of 2018, there was, for example, the Mexican president's son, or the guy who was running for president in 2018, Lopez Obrador, his son was being made fun of very innocently. His hairstyle was being made fun of. Excuse me. And so Facebook went out of their way to give additional protections specifically to that person, to that minor. It was an innocent nickname. It was they called him like Choco Flan, like after flan, the Mexican dessert. And so those are a couple examples I started early on, and I just began documenting. As you see in the video release, they made exceptions to allow attacks on straight white males, calling them filth in the context of not supporting LGBT. So yeah, just these things added up. It was kind of like what do they say? Death by a million paper cuts. Everything just kind of added up, and I began documenting that.
Now, in an article you wrote that again is linked in the description below, you said that you watched Mark Zuckerberg's congressional testimony in April 2018 and noticed a contrast between his statements dismissing any suggestion that Facebook censored political speech and the long list of exceptions Facebook issued to content moderators. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So he testified in Congress that Facebook doesn't censor political speech. However, the policies, the way they're written, it's very easy to exclude political speech. For example, like the hate speech policy. So if I say, keep Canadians out of the United States, that violates the hate speech policy for tier 3 exclusion. So like something as simple as discussing immigration now becomes hate speech. So the threshold is very low for taking something off the platform. So yeah, I didn't agree. What I witnessed was definitely in stark contrast to what he was testifying about. Yeah, there's many exceptions given. That same summer, like a couple months after he testified, there was a viral video in Texas. This is summer of 2018 of a kid who was a Trump supporter, and he got attacked. His hat got knocked off. It was a MAGA hat, I believe. And so basically, it's a video showing a Trump supporter being victimized, right? And Facebook saw the video and they said, "Hey, we know this is trending. We need you to take down this video, delete all instances of this video," because it had a minor violation where like a minor was cursing. The adult who was attacking the minor was cursing. So yeah, there was a minor violation. It could be argued with the nuances of the policy that it wasn't violating, because if you're just resharing the video, at least there's different arguments with the nuances of the policy, but yeah, they basically gave the direction to take that down. And so in many instances, they would give what's called newsworthy exceptions and give us guidance on what to do. And in 2019, there was a civic audit done by former Senator John Kyle of Arizona and his law firm. And so after that civic audit, they changed the wording. So now they kept track of the exceptions they gave. So there were some changes, but you really don't know, like at my level, if there's 5,000 other content moderators. So how much information are we seeing, and how much is Facebook doing behind closed doors that we don't know about? That's the question we need to be asking. Like, where's the oversight?
What were your coworkers like?
So I the first year and a half I was in the Spanish side, so I was one of only two gringos, as we call it. I call us two white guys. So I got along really well on the Spanish side with my coworkers there. And then in July of 2019, I transferred over to the North American side because they had a lot of people who were quitting, so they needed more people working North America. But I had the entire time I had access to all the North American like tribes and feeds, so I knew all the guidance they were giving. So yeah, my coworkers, when I transferred to the North American side, it was a little bit different culture. There'd been, I think the morale was a little bit worse on the North American side. So yeah, so as you'll see in the video, some of my coworkers are pretty blatantly open. Something you did not see in the video is, Sean Browder is the policy manager. So he's in charge of the policy for the entire site. And he basically, like, he was open like Bernie Sanders supporter. So, I mean, he can make decisions autonomously while we awaited guidance from Facebook. So yeah, overall, I mean, there's some people I got along with well, but a lot of the times you don't really know what they're saying behind your back. So as we can see from the video, we uncovered that there was some bias against me because I'm conservative. Like, some people just didn't like me at all because of my views. And some of the coworkers believed I got turned down from promotions because I was white.
Yeah, we definitely saw that, and we're gonna talk about that. But I wonder, could you? So I looked at the article that's linked in the description for this video, and it seems in just the very bit that you described in that article about the different tiers and the exceptions, it was like reading stereo instructions back in the 80s when you couldn't even decipher anything. Like, how? Like, I guess my question is, the guidance seems so specific and so nuanced. How does someone even keep up with that? What is the process for moderating this content?
Yeah, it's very, very nuanced. So I liken it to being a paralegal. Like, it's very, very wordy. And I literally had, like, every day I'd have like 20 tabs open on my browser. And like, it takes a long time to learn it. And even after 2 years, like, it's a lot. And every 2 weeks the policy changes. So I would send emails to myself, or I would take notes on all the policy changes. And but to give you an example, like just because something looks shady or looks iffy, you can't just delete it for that. You have to, they would always tell us, you have to separate your head from your heart. So yeah, continually learning. There's never a dull moment. For example, with the Wayfair human trafficking thing going on, like, we would moderate human trafficking and smuggling. But it was weird because if someone was asking, like, oh, hey, what's the best route to get from Mexico to the US? Like, that was allowed. But if someone else was like, if the smuggler was like, hey, I can get you across for X amount of dollars, that we would take down. And we look out for, as far as human trafficking, like, if there had to be certain indicators. So I had to meet like both of the criteria. Like, okay, is it someone advertising massage parlor, or is it someone offering women jobs overseas? So it's very specific. So even if you had a picture of like I was reviewing a group once, and it had, pictures of young girls who were maybe a little bit provocatively dressed, but not enough to meet the threshold for like CP, for or what do they call that, child exploitative imagery, CEI. So it didn't quite meet it. So you could tell, you knew what they were about. Like, as a human content moderator, you knew what they were talking about, but the policy wasn't specific enough for us to take it down. Sometimes we could raise jobs up, but that was always the difficulty. But yeah, it's super nuanced. Like, a funny example is there's actually a photo shoot of Melania Trump where she's fully naked next to another female. And we actually raised that up because we weren't sure if it was violating. Because normally, if you're crotch on crotch with two naked individuals, it would be violating for essentially penetration. And so this is the kind of funny, like, interesting stuff we get into. Like, they even clarify what an erection is, like the criteria for an erection. Wow. Like, if it is an erection, then it's a delete. If it's just a bulge, it stays up. So that's how nuanced it is, and that's for every single policy. Bullying, hate speech, graphic violence. Yeah.
It just seems like, just, bias aside, this seems like it would be a soul-sucking job.
Yeah, they tried to. It can be soul sucking, and there was a Verge article at theverge.com that kind of went into that. We had someone violate their NDA and talk about some of the conditions. We did have counselors on site like 24/7, and there were a lot of resources for us. We could take like 50 minutes a week just for like wellness time, just to relax. It depended on the variety of content you got. So when I was on the Spanish side, I got more cartel violence, so I would see more beheadings, and it's very brutal. On North America side, there was generally more child pornography, although I didn't really get it too often. But I mean, I had coworkers who, had kids and had to come across some of this stuff, and they were very traumatized by it. So, you had some fun memes in it, and you tried to, I think the overall culture was pretty open, very open conversations. I mean, when you're talking about graphic things and sexual things, it's very open. Whoops. Sorry, I just dropped something.
That's okay.
So yeah, it can be tough on you, like emotionally. But I know but if you're getting political memes, a lot of the stuff I got the last couple of months is mainly like political memes or political posts. So that's not too soul sucking. But you get random things mixed in there. So you really don't know what's going to show up on your screen next. So you're sitting there looking at the meme, an innocent meme, and then you click next, or you ignore that, and then up pops on your screen like something graphic or horrendous. So it is a little bit difficult.
Well, and I think, I bring that up for a couple of reasons. First off, I'm kind of glad that you're not doing that job anymore, if I'm really honest, just on a human level. But it also strikes me that if you're in that kind of role day in and day out, it would be very easy to become very dehumanized towards it. And one of the things that was striking to me about the Project Veritas videos is how it was so easy for them to equate someone wearing a MAGA hat with someone doing far worse things, that like some of the things you've already described.
Yeah. And they do tend to like lump those people together. So, I mean, in general, the media has been trying to perpetuate that lie that if you're a Trump supporter, you're racist. You're automatically a racist, right? So there are, and we saw posts. I saw posts where they would say, "Hey, Trump made a speech about immigration today," and they tell us to watch out for posts related to hate speech. So basically implying that, anything that Trump said was racist. So yeah, they like with the hate figure list. So, and I talked about this on a podcast this morning in the UK. On the hate figure list, you have people like Gavin McInnes, Tommy Robinson, Faith Goldie from Canada. So they're literally on the same list as Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels. So that whole policy is dangerous individuals and organizations. So if you're on that list, let's take Gavin McInnes, for example, that excludes him from any protections under violence and incitement. So you can call for people to shoot Gavin McInnes or Tommy Robinson, and that's allowed. So that's one other impact of that policy is, okay, you're on the list, that's fine, you're banned from Facebook, but it even allows attacks, like threats of violence against you.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that. And what it makes me think of, and I'm gonna get personal and complainy for a second. You guys will have to forgive me. It's my channel. I can do what I want. But one of the things that I noticed after I went to the Trump rally and then ultimately, decided to vote for Trump after being a Democrat for 20 years is I started getting, especially on Twitter, which is, I understand, not your area of expertise, but on Twitter, I started getting harassed by, people were creating accounts to impersonate me. And still to this day, there are accounts that are harassing me every single day, several times a day, and it's been reported to Twitter, and they do nothing. And even me as a private individual, it seems to be okay. And what you're describing to me is that Facebook has some sort of list where if you're on that list, calls for violence or harassment or anything is just completely fair game.
Yeah. So, and that's what they say they try to protect. And it's ironic because Facebook says, or some people on the left right now are boycotting Facebook and saying they're not doing enough to take down hate speech. But it's very two-sided, and that's something I think I wanted to mention too, is like right now, okay, let's say you're in the middle of the road, you're a libertarian, you're an independent, and you're watching this video and you're saying, oh, well, this is just like a political attack, or this is just political. It's more than political. It's because the roles could be reversed in 5-10 years. Or let's play devil's advocate, and let's say, the government took over Facebook and then it started censoring people on the left. So you want to have it as fair as possible. So even if you're on the left side or you're a Democrat and you're seeing this and you're seeing that people on the right are being censored, that's not a good thing, because the same thing could happen to you if the people in power are people on the right, or if there's censorship of people on the left. So that's important to take into account. The censorship and freedom of speech is important for everybody.
Ryan, what is the definition of hate speech that you were working from?
Yeah, so hate speech is defined as any kind of attack based on your protected characteristic or your PC. So that would be race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender. So those categories are all protected. So the first tier 1, deals with like dehumanizing comparisons, direct attacks, obviously. But if you call someone, an ethnicity, like Americans or cockroaches, or you attack someone's nationality. And then there's this tier 2 is attacks on their character. If you say, all Americans are ugly or deficient or mentally insane. And then tier 3 is more exclusion. So if you say, let's keep Canadians out of the United States, something as simple as that. If you're excluding them in any way politically. And it's funny because I think this was in 2017, there was a trending phrase on social media talking about abortion and whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. But this one was attacking, I think it was Alabama, because of their abortion bill. And so the phrase that everyone was mimicking, like Alyssa Milano, was men shouldn't be making laws about women's bodies. Mm-hmm. And we have to take things literally. So that phrase violates Facebook's hate speech policies. Men shouldn't be allowed to make laws about women's bodies. That violates. So of course it's trending. All the people are making posts about, all the celebrities are making posts about it. So of course, what does Facebook do? They cave and they make an exception. They say, oh, hey, this is trending, but it's newsworthy. It's very newsworthy. This is important in civil discourse. So we're going to allow these statements. So that's kind of funny. So we always it's only one-sided. You only see them giving exceptions to people on the left. So whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, the fact is Facebook is censoring, is making exceptions, and is favoring one side over the other. So that's totally contrary to what Zuckerberg testified about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, people in the chat are mentioning Nick Cannon and the comments that he made recently. So how would Nick Cannon fare on Facebook given what he said in the last couple of days? Yeah. So if you guys want to do research, there's someone named Marcus Garvey. Okay. So Marcus Garvey was a black nationalist in the U.S. in the early 1900s. Okay. And I came across one of his posts once, and I think I don't know if I asked the supervisor about it, but I researched it to see if Marcus Garvey would be on the hate figure list, since, racists are on that list. Like League of the South is on that list, clearly racist. They should be on that list. And Marcus Garvey actually openly advocated for segregation. He was so extreme that even like black civil rights leaders at the time rejected him. But Marcus Garvey is not on that list. So a lot of the Black Lives Matter movements now, they actually reference Marcus Garvey and kind of call him a hero. So with Nick Cannon, with his racist commentary, and at one time I was fiddling around and searching different keywords in our internal tool, so we had like a resource where we could search different guidance on the policy. So if you search Black Pride, it pulls up
things, whether or not that's violating or not. So the phrase Black Pride on Facebook for Facebook is not violating, but the phrase White Pride is. So generally with the hate speech policy, as long as you're not putting down another race, you're fine. Like if I say, blacks are better than whites, obviously violating. But if I say blacks are great, you're not putting down another category. You're just promoting one. But for some reason, white pride, they just assume everyone that says white pride. Well, yeah. So white pride is violating and black pride is not. So, I mean, if I saw that video, like if I saw the interview with Nick Cannon, I saw the whole 2 minutes. And yeah, that would be violating. But like you say, if Facebook, if that became viral, Facebook would probably pull another Don Lemon and say, even though Don Lemon's saying white males are terror threats, we're going to make a newsworthy exception and allow that on the platform. So,
well, and one of the things I think is so interesting about the whole Nick Cannon thing is he's not in trouble for saying that white people are biologically inferior to black people. He's not in trouble for that. Mm-hmm. He's in trouble for making anti-Semitic comments.
Yeah, and we did have, that is a violation of the hate speech policy, any attacks on Jews or any religion, and even visually. So even if you have a meme of a guy with a really long nose, mm-hmm. and you have, some comparison to a rat or whatever, that would violate the hate speech policy. Same thing goes if you have a meme or if you have a drawing of Muhammad or someone wearing head garb related to the Islam religion, and then something attacking them, even like a foot kicking them would be a violation of the hate speech policy. But yeah, with Nick Cannon, it should violate. I mean, it should violate our policies, but they tend to just give exceptions willy-nilly whenever when they want to favor one side.
How much leeway do content moderators have in terms of their decision making?
So there is a little bit of a gray area. I mean, here's the thing. So let's say on an average day, you look at 200 pieces of content, right? So you're clicking, delete, ignore. You get through 200 that day. So let's say 1,000 in a week. Out of those 1,000 in a week, you get audited on 50.
Oh, wow.
So, and they're pretty strict with the points. So if you get one wrong, excuse me.
It's okay. Take your time.
If you get one wrong, you're pretty much in trouble, almost in trouble. You have to really watch your score. So the audits are really important. Now, so you could maybe get away with taking things down you shouldn't, but they would catch on eventually. But within the policy, I mean, there is they try to make it as objective as possible. There is some subjectivity. Excuse me. Well, sorry, guys.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. You're fine.
So there is some subjectivity. And yeah, so there's always gray area. I mean, if you interpret the way you interpret the policies is up to you. And there may be posts that give additional guidance, like, hey, this is super trending. So I mean, they always tell you to separate your head from your heart. And so you can do that. You can try to be objective as possible, and you can try to argue. I would always argue with policy. So if you don't agree with something, you can bring it up to the policy team and you can make changes you can almost make changes to the policy. You can bring it up if it's a really big contentious issue and we don't all disagree. We've given feedback to Facebook and they've changed their policies. So we influence and shape some of the policy with Facebook. There's some gray area. It's pretty spelled out. Like we were saying earlier, it's very nuanced. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Facebook we have shaped some of the policy. We can go in. Yeah. I mean, that kind of ties into how they can flag what's trending, like Greta Thunberg, Boogaloo. Maybe we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Guys, if you're just joining the stream, we are talking to Ryan Hartwig, who is the Project Veritas insider at Facebook. If you like what we're doing so far, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out. So, Ryan, I was getting some questions in the chat about was there any specific policy around Trump himself and how his stuff should be handled?
So There were things specifically about Trump. So, for example, we had a bullying slang list. So we would come across very common words. Generally, if you attack someone based on their temperament, mentality, disposition, that would be taken down. Like if I attack you on Facebook and I say, Carlin, you're this and that, and you specifically report it, when I'm reviewing that as a content moderator, I see that you reported it. You specifically reported it. So that gives me more power to be able to take the comment down. So if it was just some random person reporting it, that's different. I couldn't take it down as easily. But if you're reporting it and they're attacking you, then I can take it down. So an example of the bullying slang list. So they basically said, so if you call someone a Trump humper, that's allowed. So even if I call you, even if I call Carlin a Trump humper and you specifically report it, that still stays up. So they try to say, oh, we're trying to keep up, some forms of political speech, but then if I call you a feminazi, that's not allowed. So if I call Carlin a feminazi and you report it, that gets taken down. So there are a couple of examples of that. But at the same, if I called you a Biden humper as well, I mean, that would stay up. So it works both ways sometimes. What was the other example? Trump humper, feminazi, snowflake. Snowflake gets taken down. And that's one of the biggest attacks on the people on the left. Is the people on the right call the people on the left snowflake, right? So that gets deleted if you call me
in any context.
No, not any context.
Okay.
If you call me a snowflake, Ryan, you're a snowflake, and I have to report it for it to get taken down.
Wow.
But still, I mean, so Trump humper stays up, but snowflake gets taken down. Yeah.
All right. What about Antifa? How does, Antifa's been designated a terrorist organization by the actual government. How does Facebook feel about Antifa?
So as of the time when I left, there was no designation for Antifa as a criminal organization at all. So within that same policy we're talking about, dangerous individuals, I mean, we have a couple
Oh, Ryan, I just lost your sound.
Yeah,
you're back. Okay.
So within that category of dangerous individuals, we have like cartels, criminals, gangs. So they're all listed in that policy. So we have, Antifa. So basically, as of the time that I left, they were not listed in that in that category. Mm-hmm. As far back as 2017, they were giving guidance to like, hey, there's this big protest against Trump and Pence in 2017, and they're saying that this protest occurred in at least 9 cities. It's going to be a couple of days long, and they're like, there have been unconfirmed links between this protest and Antifa, and there will be counter protesters. And then they said, hey, important call outs to know about these protests. Antifa is not considered a hate org. Look out for the following violations: coordinating harm and hate speech, share trends, and post questions in the comments below. So it's interesting to know that we're kind of their eyes and ears. So Facebook at the highest levels, they don't know what's going on their platform. So they rely on us, hey, raise up any trends, flag anything that's trending. So obviously Antifa was trending. And it's funny because they specifically mentioned, hey, there's a protest in 9 cities. And it's, so everything points to it being organized, but then they say there's unconfirmed links between this protest and Antifa.
Oh, come on.
So, I mean, any other organization that does similar things, I mean, is immediately flagged. So we even flagged, like this past December, we had the impeachment proceedings going on. Mm-hmm. So I actually saw a lot of posts calling for civil war, like a Boogaloo civil war. If Trump gets impeached, we're going to do a civil war. So I raised that up to my supervisor, and they're like, oh yeah, keep on flagging that, keep on sending jobs about that. So why doesn't the same thing happen with Antifa? If we're seeing Antifa a lot, they seem not to care. So the consequence of that is, and I actually asked my supervisor about it. I'm like, hey, like we were talking about civil war, and he's like, hey, this is great stuff. Keep on sending that, because if we'd seen the same thing happening in 2016, we would have put things in place to prevent it. That's what he told me. So like they want to know what's going on so they can just,
how did you interpret that? Put things in place to prevent it.
I mean, it is kind of a vague statement. So putting things in place to prevent it would mean changing the policy, changing the wording of the policy to prevent, any wording that would be construed to imply that you would be overthrowing the government. So the way it's worded right now, the way it's worded in the policy currently, if you disagree with the outcome of an election and you're calling for violence because of the outcome of an election, that violates. But if in general terms, if you're just like, hey, let's do a civil war, let's have a civil war, like that doesn't violate. You have to be a little more specific. Like if you're like, okay, let's beat up Trump supporters, or if you're more specific, that could violate. But yeah, putting things in place means just changing their policy. So every time there was any kind of event on the right or large event, they would use that to change their policies. So like after the Las Vegas shooting, was that 2018 or 2017? The guy who at the country music festival, they changed the policy about firearms, and they prevented any kind of sharing of 3D instructions for firearms. So it just gives you an example. Like if there's any big event, they can use that to change or modify their policy. Another example would be, they made white nationalism more of a threat than any other kind of nationalism after the New Zealand shooting. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be like more of a focus on, hey, if anything happens involving whites that's bad, we're going to make more policies regarding them. But going back to it again, Marcus Garvey, black nationalist, not even on their radar, and he's being propped up as a hero by Black Lives Matter.
So I've got some questions in the chat, and people are getting into specifics, Ryan. So yeah, I want to get your take on them. Okay. So one person asked, Dion Bram asks, what about saying punch a Nazi? How would that go on Facebook?
Yeah, okay. So under violence and incitement, there's a whole graph, like a chart, literally to interpret that. So if you're attacking, so punch is a form of violence. It's mid-severity violence, right? Okay, so there's low severity, mid-severity, high severity. So, and then your target is a Nazi, right? It's an anonymous person. It's a random person. And there's been some changes and tweaks in the policy. So punch a Nazi, I think it's changed so many times. I think it has to be a little more specific. If it's just a random, that's a really good question. Like I say, the policy changes so often. I think at one point it was, I'm seeing the comment there, punch a Nazi, Antifa, or brown shirt. So punching Antifa is accurate. I'm gonna consult with Zach, the other coworker from Tampa, about the recent. I know at one point that would be taken down, but I'm pretty sure because it's kind of vague. Punch a Nazi. No, that punch a Nazi would be allowed, because if you're a Nazi, you're technically a member of a dangerous individual organization, and under that policy, you're excluded from anything under the violence and incitement. So if I say punch a Nazi, if I say, hey, go kill Gavin McInnes, that's allowed. If I say go kill Tommy Robinson, that's allowed. If I say go kill a Nazi, that's allowed. So what if they're replacing Republicans with Nazi, then using it? That one would be taken down. If they're saying kill, generally if it's kill, it's usually taken down. If you're saying punch, it's allowed more often. I hope that helps.
No, I think that's a great explanation. And one of the things we were talking about before we came on air is Antifa is not considered a hate organization, but what about the cops? Yeah.
So that's another great one. And we'll get back to, I see a comment about Alex Jones. We'll get back there in a second. So cops. So let's say, okay, imagine like a photo of a cop arresting someone, right? You can see the cop's face. So they're a private individual per the policy. Mm-hmm. And the comment below is, that cop is a pig. All right. So under the bullying policy, I believe 1.2 comparison to animal. And it's funny because some of my coworkers like knew the policy like the back of their hand. Like they knew it very well and they could reference it. But anyways, if you compare someone to an animal, that's immediate delete. So if I say Carlin, if I say Ryan, you're a pig, any kind of comparison animal, even if I don't report it, it gets taken down, right? So how is that cop in the image different from a private individual? Well, they're not really. They're not a public figure. They don't have 100,000 or more followers on social media. So the guidance they gave us, and this was in September of this last year, is okay. They said, okay, all cops are pigs. Would we err on the side of deleting this, and they said we're giving the guidance that we should consider pig as targeted cursing. So they basically changed the definition of what pig means. Like, pig is actually targeted cursing. So under that section of the policy, targeted cursing, you need a name and face match to take it down. Mm-hmm. So essentially, give me 1 second. Let me get a drink of water.
Sure. Guys, if you have a question for Ryan, please make sure to send it in. As usual, I see super chats a lot better than normal stuff, but as you can see, we are really trying to keep up with questions in the chat. If you haven't already, please smash that like button, give it a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so basically, so if there's a different part of the bullying policy. So it's, if I call someone, cursing is like, if I call someone a jackass, or let's see, what would be cursing? Call someone an asshole. If I call someone an asshole, that takes a little bit more to be taken down. So I would need to report it directly for it to get taken down. So they're saying, hey, we're just going to change the pig just for these. They're just changing the way the policy is for these circumstances. So they're saying instead of pig being an instant takedown, instant delete, now it requires a name and face match from the person who. So essentially, in that post we were talking about, if you have a picture of the cop and below it says that cop is a pig, for that to get taken down now, that specific cop in the image has to report that post. When is that going to happen?
Wow.
So it allows more attacks on cops because they changed, and their only explanation for why they're doing this is that is because of how the term is used in the NA market. So not much rationale for that. Yeah.
So what about Alex Jones? So 412 commented, was it Facebook that said you couldn't talk about Alex Jones unless it was negative?
Yeah. So under the dangerous orgs policy, and Infowars was a banned domain, but generally anyone in that hate figure list or hate domain list, like Tommy Robinson, if there's any PSR stands for praise, support, or represent. So literally, if you just by sharing, if I just shared a link to like Tommy Robinson's website or to Alex Jones' website, by doing that, I'm representing them. So even if it's like neutral, it's not allowed. So the only way I can even mention Alex Jones or Infowars or Tommy Robinson or Gavin McInnes, the only way I can post that at all on Facebook is in a condemning nature, as long as I condemn it. But the funny thing is, we can't read into sarcasm. So and Mark Dice asked me about this. So if you want to get away with posting something on Facebook, just be sarcastic, and we have to like read it literally. So
pro tip, guys.
yeah. So I would have to say like, oh, I hate Alex Jones, and then I could post a link to his website.
That's and would could you do like I hate Alex Jones with like a smiley face, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge? Or would you judge that?
The emojis are very. We have to kind of read around the context of them, but yeah, I think that would still be allowed. We can't really. Emojis are kind of ambiguous. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, so Kate has this question in the chat, and this is actually a similar question that I got from my locals community. Do you see any of the influences coming from China in regards to these policies?
So I know that there's an election training deck for Taiwan. So they have election training decks on a global level. So they have like Spain elections, UK, Canada, Poland. Taiwan. So they have some influence or like oversight as far as elections in Taiwan. Let's see here. I'm trying to think if there's anything about China. I don't remember any explicit posts about China. Yeah, that's a tough one. I haven't researched that very much.
Mhm.
I know that they work with governments, various governments throughout the world. But yeah, that one I'll have to get back to you about. That's a good question.
Okay. No worries. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. This is actually a conversation I was having with Benjamin Boyce recently too about China's influence at universities and that sort of thing. I think it's really interesting. But let's go to some other questions from my locals community. Al Dente, I see your super chat as well. So Luke Sneeringer from Locals asks, does Mr. Hartwig view censorship at Facebook as being an internal coordinated effort or a decentralized one? If it's the latter, is it mostly intentional or driven by unrealized bias?
I mean, I think unrealized bias does happen. That's possible. That's happening. So there's like 6 people. Like I was talking to one of the team managers at work. She's like, yeah, I used to have interviews used to have video conferences all the time with the people at Facebook, like at headquarters. And she said there's like 6 people who control all the policy. And of course they're all based in like San Francisco. And everyone knows you can't really like get a job there. I mean, it's hard to get a job unless or most of the people that work there happen to be very left wing. And so I think it is like it's built into the policy. I think it's not like an accident, like the fact that they're pushing a certain agenda. And to give you the extreme example, I gave you that example of summer 2018, the Trump supporter video, kid getting attacked. Okay, Facebook says delete it. So on the flip side, there's another senator. There's a far right senator in Australia named Fraser Anning, and he was giving a press conference, and a kid, another minor, walked up behind him and cracked an egg on the back of his head. Okay, and then the senator turned around and slapped the kid in the head a couple of times. So that clearly violated our child abuse policy for repeated slapping of a minor. But Facebook gave an exception to allow child abuse on the platform because it kind of showed, a right-wing senator getting attacked. So those are the lengths they'll go to. They'll allow child abuse on the policy. They'll allow child abuse on the platform. Sorry, on the platform to push their narrative. So I definitely think it's built into the policy. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So do you follow the Timcast IRL podcast at all?
Yeah, I've watched some of his
Tim,
shows. I'm trying to get on his podcast actually. So if you guys know him,
well, you should connect with Lydia on Twitter, and she's, I think, works on that. But so Adam on the Timcast IRL podcast was talking about, so he is kind of like this hippie, like soy boy type of guy, and he's recently decided that he's going to vote for Trump, and he announced this, I think, on the podcast or something to that effect, and they cut it down and they made a clip of it, and saying like liberal decides he's going to vote for Trump or something like that. I don't remember exactly the language they used, and it went crazy viral. It got a ton of views, and then they noticed all of a sudden that it had gotten deleted from Facebook. What do you think happened there?
Yeah, so they definitely can flag content they want to flag. And it's funny because people are like, oh, well, Facebook can't control everything that's on the platform. I mean, they have some pretty good tools to be able to identify and track content. So what I've seen is if something's trending, if they're calling Greta Thunberg retarded, they have a way to inject those violating hashtags into our queues. They can inject those hashtags in our queue so that we get all the jobs that are calling Greta Thunberg retarded. So if they can do that, then what's to stop them from, deleting someone's account or deleting a post? That's what I've witnessed.
How would they rationalize that though? Just someone, an average guy saying, I'm going to vote for Trump, and they delete it. How do they rationalize that?
So that might be happening at a higher level than me, maybe at like Facebook's headquarters, because we have to be kind of transparent with the actions we take. So, I mean, it could be, like, do you remember the what was it? The raid Area 51, Las Vegas?
Yeah, I do.
So that group got deleted like for like one day by accident. So I literally think it was just a content moderator who was like, "Hey, how cool would it be if I just deleted this event?" So that's possible. But with his post, was it multiple posts or just one?
I think it was. I think the video was posted a couple different places. I'm not exactly sure. I just know that they definitely noticed it was taken down.
Yeah, so that could be happening at a higher level. I mean, there could be. It's possible there could be a team at Facebook with less visibility that's doing things like that. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So do the moderators, when they're kind of messing around, they're like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if I got rid of the Area 51 group on Facebook?
Yeah.
Do they have any, I guess, self-awareness about the impact of their actions in the broader world?
No, I don't think so. And you get kind of detached from it. And because I've talked to other media organizations who have accounts on Facebook, and they've worked for years and years and built time and money, into it, and they have organic subscribers. And then from one day to the next, their account gets deleted. And for us, it's very, very just ordinary, just run of the mill. So I think so on the keyboard, we had like keyboard shortcuts. So like 1 was like ignore, and then like I think 270 was like delete or something like that. So I mean, with the click of a button, you could take down someone's page. I think there was a appeal process, so I think you have to delete it like twice. So yeah, I think you're kind of far removed from the impact on people, and yeah, like you say, you try to separate your head from your heart, and they try to train us that way. But as you can see from the video, there was a lot of content moderators who enjoyed taking down Trump posts. And the one guy, Israel Ampran, he was a piece of work. He was like, yeah, I can't wait to delete more Trump things. So those are the kinds of people you don't want doing content moderation. Now, there were people who are fair. And a quick aside here. So the left, attacks Project Veritas. They say they selectively edit. And I even said in my interview the same thing. I said, hey, there's some coworkers who are fair. And so if Project Veritas truly were like biased or just political hacks, they wouldn't have allowed that in my interview. Like we did one interview. We didn't do many reruns or cuts or takes, and they left that in. So yeah, there's it's definitely fascinating to see like what Facebook allows and what Facebook doesn't allow.
Definitely. And we'll get more into the Project Veritas stuff in a sec, but I just want to make sure I get Al Dente's question before it flies off the screen. Says, since Black Lives Matter has caused the death of more Black people in the past few months than were killed by the police, and Facebook supports Black Lives Matter over the police, then did that mean that Facebook encourages violence? Yeah,
it does. And I even had this experience with another big tech company called Uber. So I worked as a fraud analyst for Uber Corporate for like 3 months in 2016. And this is in my ebook as well. That's on Amazon about some of my previous jobs. But basically, Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, at one point said, all lives matter. He made a statement about that. And the powers that be, or people affiliated with Black Lives Matter, forced him to retract that statement. And then Uber donated some money to an organization in Oakland, like an old Sears building in Oakland, and one of the floors was dedicated to the Black Panther organization. So like the influence that Black Lives Matter has is huge. So yeah, they're causing, for Facebook to support a group that's has a certain agenda. I mean, it just goes to show how much influence Black Lives Matter has. But I always like to say, I mean, if you were to substitute any other race with Black Lives Matter, like Asian Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, if you were to say Mexican Lives Matter, I mean, some of them don't sound as racist as others. So it just goes to show you how we've been conditioned. Like in my article, I in the video, I shared a link to a protest I attended, right? A freedom of speech rally. And it was outside of a mosque in Phoenix. This is shortly after Charlie Hebdo. I was literally holding a sign. I'm on the cover of LA Times, holding a sign with cartoons drawn by people who were massacred 4 months prior, and they told me that I was advocating violence. So, I mean, it just goes to show you like the double standard of the bias. So if I were to share a link to me with a at a pro-choice event wearing a pussy hat, like, do you think I would have gotten in trouble? No.
No, I'm sure not. And I want to get more into that in a sec, but I just want to do a quick pause, folks. We are talking to Ryan Hartwig from the Project Veritas frame as a Facebook insider. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, hit that thumbs up, all that good stuff. So, Ryan, what made you reach out to Project Veritas?
Yeah, so I documented about 19 or 20 examples of bias, and I wrote a letter to a few people in the government, Congress and senators, and I didn't hear back initially. Didn't hear back from them. So I reached out to Project Veritas. I think the thing that pushed me over the edge was just, like you say, just lumping together like average Joes as racists, and just that media narrative that Facebook is perpetrating that's basically says that Trump supporters are racist. Like we talked about quite a few of the examples already. And as I mentioned earlier, it's more like death by a million paper cuts. So everything just kind of added up. So I reached out to Project Veritas. I began filming with a hidden camera. There was many months when I filmed with a hidden camera. So what you see in the video, it's a pretty long video. It's like 20 minutes, but there was a lot more that didn't come out in the video. So yeah, there was a lot of things documented. There might be a story coming out next week about Venezuela. Some of Facebook's how Facebook treated certain certain things in Venezuela. It might come out next week with Newsmax. But yeah, that was what brought me to Project Veritas. I was just fed up with it. Like, I'm pretty centrist, I would say. I mean, I lean conservative, of course, but I'm more libertarian. So just seeing, like, I would be freaking out if the government were doing this on a global level or in the U.S. censoring speech. So what makes Facebook think they can get away with this?
Yeah. And I think I just want to emphasize the point you made earlier. And it was something I was thinking about earlier today is, one of my core values, and I was a Democrat for 20 years, and I still consider myself to be a liberal, although I definitely have veered more libertarian in the past several months than I ever thought I would. Yeah. And one of my core values has always been free speech. And I remember being a teenager and understanding the need to fight for free speech because of the slippery slope. And once you start censoring speech for one person, that means that your speech might be next. And I feel like that was something that was taught to me very early on by, I guess I was lucky about the schools I went to. So I understood that, but this idea that people seem to have today on the left, that it's okay to only censor speech to the right, as though that's never going to come back to bite them. I think that's incredibly misguided. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the tables could be turned at the very quickly. The tables could be turned very quickly. You look at Latin America. I think Pinochet was a dictator in Chile, and he was more right wing, but he was very very controlling. People died. So I mean, there can be dictators on both sides, the right and the left. So if you're talking about your basic freedoms, like freedom of speech, Second Amendment, something that wasn't really publicized in that video is I was actually open carrying a firearm at the protest outside of a mosque, and it was very, very peaceful until the counter protesters showed up. And the biggest coincidence is that the guy who reported me to HR, he was actually at that same protest like 5 years prior as a counter protester.
Wow.
But let me tell you, when they showed up, the counter protesters showed up, it just got really, really wild. So I mean, your First Amendment, your Second Amendment, we saw that couple in St. Louis, Missouri, who just got their guns confiscated because they were trying to defend themselves. So I think people on the left can sympathize with that. I mean, freedom of speech. Yeah, it's really important to have just freedom of speech, and the reason freedom of speech exists. The type of speech we should exist is the speech that you don't agree with. So just because you don't agree with something I say or you say doesn't mean that a private company can censor what you're saying. And this kind of goes into like the whole role of Facebook as an intermediary. So they are basically an intermediary between you and whoever you're talking to. And I did some research on that. There's a good article about Section 230. But basically that law was written like in 1996. So the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, it's written in 1996 before the internet was big. So they wanted the free market to flourish. They didn't want little publishers, like little chats or forums, to get sued for things that they didn't write. So, but back then, like there wasn't like a monopoly on social media like there is now. Like Facebook's basically a monopoly. So the landscape's changed so differently in the last 20 years. So it's important that we recognize, like, it is Facebook is essentially a private platform in a way, and heaven forbid, I mean, I wouldn't want it to be regulated like a utility, but at the same time, there needs to be accountability. And with Zuckerberg in charge, and I think he has like majority share of the board or something like that. Like there's no way to oust him. Even his board has been pretty upset with how he's handled some things. But with him at the helm, I really don't see anything changing. But yeah, the sheer amount of influence and power that Facebook wields on a global level is just staggering. I mean, he puts Dale Carnegie and those railroad tycoons to shame.
So based on your experience, would you call Facebook a publisher or a platform?
Yeah, based on some of the decisions that I've witnessed that they've made, they're more of a publisher. And so it's tough because it's hard to define it, because you don't really want to define it so in such a binary manner, because the internet's so complex. So if there was some middle ground we could find where we could legislate some more restrictions for them, or allow freer speech on the internet, I'd like to see, if you don't like something that someone's saying, instead of getting them banned, why not just have a way to mute them permanently, which we already do have. But Facebook's become such a powerful place where you have your friends. Like you losing your ability to connect with your friends is a huge deal. So I think the solution is, there's some antitrust legislation that's begun with Matt Gaetz, a congressman from Florida. So I was in communication with his office prior to the release. And so they last week, they announced that they're launching an antitrust probe. I'm not sure how far that will go, but if I need to testify in Congress, I will. It's going to be a tough road, an uphill battle, because Facebook has so many lobbyists, so much influence. Even during the Obama administration, we saw this revolving door between big tech executives and the Obama administration. So they work for Obama for a couple of years, and then they go back to San Francisco. And then all those companies team up. So you've got Google, YouTube, and they all coordinate. The InfoWars ban was all the same day across 3 platforms. So
yeah, how that's not an antitrust violation, I have no idea. I want to make sure we get in a couple more questions I have from locals, because my buddy Eric sent in 2 questions. And then we're going to talk about your HR complaint, because I really want to talk about that. But Eric wants to know, the leadership at Facebook, Twitter, and Google/YouTube are no longer hiding their company's bias against conservatives, nor their censorship practices. What do you think has emboldened them, Ryan?
So what has emboldened them? I think just Trump. Yeah, Trump winning again. So they've thrown everything they can at him. So there was the investigation, like the Russian thing. So for 3 years they were crying Russia. So I think they've really come out of the closet, so to speak, or kind of stop trying to hide the fact that they're biased. What has emboldened them? Yeah, I don't know. Like, we're seeing every influence on the left going all out. I mean, you see coronavirus; they're trying to milk that for all it's worth. We're seeing all the riots, the protests. So I just think, it really makes you kind of into a conspiracy theorist, like, because you think about globalism, you're like, okay, well, we know the U.S. has enemies, like from a very basic level, we know the U.S. has enemies, like, and they want to destroy America. So if like somewhat foreign influence, like China or whatever, wanted to destroy America. Like, this is how they're going to do it. Now, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, they're definitely emboldened. I mean, they had the civic audit. They tried to make things appear like they're being more fair. And you know that they are biased because the left is trying to spin it like they're not, they're actually, they try to spin it like Facebook's supporting Donald Trump. Right. So they tried to spin that this past fall, and they're trying to spin that as well.
And Eric has one more question, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but do you see a path to reversing this, or do you see this as kind of a permanent thing that we're just going to have to deal with?
It's going to be hard to reverse. They have so much power at this point. I don't know how we're going to stop them. And yeah, I mean, it can be reversed. We'll see what happens with Congress. If Congress loses some seats, or if the Senate loses some seats, then it's going to be tough to do anything with legislation. So, the European Union, for example, has been able to crack down on some of the things that Facebook does, some of the antitrust, because they have a little more power than our government, which is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. So I don't know if we can reverse it. I mean, and that's the thing, like going to Gab and Parler, I don't know if that's the best solution. And you can join those and be on those, but to go off Twitter completely means that just Twitter will be even more left than what it already is. So I don't know if it'd be able to be reversed. It'd be really tough to reverse it at this point, unless we were just to shut down Facebook completely, which wouldn't be a bad thing for a while, right?
A reform that I would like to see is just if it's legal speech in the United States, if it's protected by the First Amendment, then you do not delete it. I would be very comfortable with that level of oversight. Yeah. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, we theorized with this. Some of my coworkers, we talked about it at work. We were like, hey, well, this policy can stay, but all these other policies need to be taken away. So, hey, as long as you're not like trying to kill someone or like commit violence, like as long as you're not explicitly saying, hey, I'm gonna go kill someone, something that violates the law, or obviously take down child porn, the graphic videos. If it's like a beheading, that's a little bit questionable. But as far as like speech, like, hey, I hate this person or I hate this group, I mean, yeah, you have to leave it up. I think that'd be a good threat. It's because there's so many. I think I agree with you, Carlin, because otherwise, where do you draw the line? Mm-hmm. If you don't stick with what's in the law, in the law, then where do you draw the line? There's some other entity is going to be deciding what the threshold is. So you just have to kind of stick with what the law is. I think that's a really good solution.
Yeah. And, this is a conversation that I've had with the moderators of my civil discussion group that I have on Facebook, that I am deathly afraid of Facebook deleting this group at any moment. But I've actually had this conversation with them where back in the day, I'm talking like 15 years ago, the social media best practice for types of comments that you don't like or posts that you don't like was you let the community correct itself. You can let someone be a jackass and post something that you don't like, but you allow the community to push back on it so you don't have to. And that was actually considered a social media best practice at one point. And now we've completely gone off the rails with that best practice, and instead has become all about like censorship or just delete something that offends someone.
Yeah. And someone mentioned the whole, you can't yell fire if there's a fire. Okay, so if you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were to yell fire in a crowded theater, there's immediate risk of harm to the people in that theater, right? Because if they're going to panic, they're going to trample on each other. If someone says on Facebook, kill all Americans, is there an immediate threat to Americans? Is there someone standing behind your screen after you post that who's going to run out and start like murdering Americans? Like, no, like, so that's the challenge too with like the virtual platform is, people are emboldened online because a lot of times they're anonymous. So they're just posting behind a weird profile. So there's a lot of crazy shit that gets said online, which is unfortunate, which is one of the consequences of dealing with technology and the internet. So I don't think it's fair to compare like some law. I don't think that's a fair comparison, because if I'm in a crowded theater, it's very different because there can be there's an immediate threat to someone's well-being.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about when you got called into HR.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we lay out this incident clearly. So you talked about you went to this free speech protest. You were holding up a sign that from Charlie Hebdo, right? That led to the drawings from Charlie Hebdo. Do I have that right?
Yeah. The cartoon. Yep.
Yeah, and you got your picture taken. You got it on the front page of the LA Times, and basically what you did was you sent a link out to that article to your coworkers, just kind of like shooting the shit, like,
Yeah.
water cooler banter, like, hey guys, I'm on the front page of the LA Times, isn't that cool? And you got called into HR for that. What happened?
Yeah, so this was early January, like January 2nd or so. And as you can imagine, we had the most open-minded conversations ever. Like some of our coworkers towards the end, we literally made a t-shirt design called like DP on the rocks, like short for like double penetration on the rocks. Like these are kind of like crazy conversations you have. I mean, when you're looking at crazy shit, you're very open-minded. So I shared a link. I thought we were talking maybe about religion or Islam or something. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shared something like that. And I literally shared the link, didn't say anything about Muslims at all. And the funny thing is, like, I have a lot of Muslim friends. Like, I've been to the mosque here in Tempe, Arizona. I went to Arizona State. I actually probably know more Arabic. I know a couple of phrases than anybody. I took Arabic 101 in college. I failed it, but I took it. So yeah, right after I shared that link, that guy later that day, he like literally moved seats. And I'm like, that's weird. He didn't say anything to me. And then 3 weeks later, I got called into HR. So what he did, he escalated it all the way to the top. He went to like HR compliance. So he didn't just deal with the local HR there. So in the video you see, and it was kind of fortuitous that this happened. It became part of the story. So when I got pulled into HR randomly, and they're like, "Hey, you're in trouble for." So in the first interview with Natasha, she's like, "Hey, you violated our acceptable use policy." She told me you were advocating for violence, and what you shared was discriminatory in nature. So, yeah, that's what she determined.
Were you doing either of those things?
No, and I wrote like a 2-page like essay to her after that first interview, like fighting back about it, and because I was simply sharing the link. Now, what LA Times said about me, that's their issue, right? Like, I didn't say anything about what I was doing. So after I shared that letter, I emailed, I literally went to the directory at Cognizant, like found all the legal people and like send them an email. I even emailed, it's funny because I actually emailed like the PR person for like all of Cognizant. I was just like emailing all these people like this, I'm fed up with this. And if they would have handled it better, it wouldn't have become such a story, but now it blew up in their face. Yeah, I mean,
good for you.
So, but yeah, so that first time, anyways, I got caught in the first time. She told me one thing. Then I sent the email and explained, no, you're wrong. And then I got called into HR the second time. Now, you're a what kind of psychologist? I'm
an organizational psychologist. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys watch this, it's really fascinating. If you compare the first interview to the second interview with Natasha, in the second interview, her boss is there, like a lady from HR from the other building. And then in the left corner that you don't see is the site manager, Ralph. So she's got two superiors in the room. She's super nervous the second time. The first meeting, she's very confident. The second meeting, she's like super nervous. She's always glancing to the left.
Well, and I just want to comment too, and I just want to step back. You shared a link to a major newspaper with a photo of you to your coworkers.
That's literally all I did.
The fact that, from my experience, the fact that this required not just one HR meeting, but two is absurd. And it is even more absurd that they actually brought in, like they were literally, well, maybe not literally, but they were making kind of a federal case out of you sharing a link with your coworker. Now, did other coworkers share links kind of the same way that you did?
It's funny you ask, because I actually like caught some of my coworkers like using the chats, which are Facebook's chat system, using the Facebook chat to like harass me at one point. And they would be groups, they would form their own little groups, and they'd give it like, weird nicknames, and they would there was all kinds of BS going on, just like using it for personal use. So the argument that I violated their acceptable use policy by using their chat system for personal use is asinine.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And folks, if you haven't watched the Project Veritas video, I believe I linked it in the description below. If not, you all know where to find Project Veritas. And I think, watch this video, and it's actually absurd, because the argument that they made is that Ryan violated their policies by sending out the link on company resources.
Yeah. And it's another fascinating aspect of it is Cognizant didn't have access to those chats because it was a Facebook tool. So they had to get permission and request a permission from Facebook to get a copy of all those chats that I sent out. So I don't know if Facebook was involved in that decision at all, but at some point, someone at Facebook had to share and communicate those chats that I sent. So,
Ryan, if you had to estimate how many man hours got put into cracking the case on you sharing a link to the LA Times, how many man hours do you think went into this?
Yeah, I mean, and she was. This was a busy time for Natasha, the HR person, because we were nearing the end of the project. But she had to get HR compliance involved, and those are usually like high up on the food chain, probably higher salary people in corporate. So I mean, yeah, like who knows, maybe like 20 to 30 man hours, if I could just guess.
Okay, guys, yeah. just so we're clear, this is stupid. This is, I mean, so what was running through your head? Let's even just go back to the first meeting with HR. What was running through your head when you got called in and you were told that it was discriminatory in nature to share this link to the LA Times?
So what's funny too is well, I was very nervous. So I got pulled in. I was very, very nervous, and you can hear that in my voice in the first interview. And I was like, is this about the LA Times article? Like I kind of guessed like halfway through like what it was for. And what's even funnier too is the HR rep, I actually respected her, like Natasha. She did a pretty good job. It was a tough job, but I actually knew her from high school. Like we went to the same high school together.
Oh wow, that's funny.
So we were like super close, but we knew of each other, I think. So yeah, when I first got called in, I was very, very nervous, and I just tried to get a little bit of an explanation. And then the second meeting, I was just like, why is this happening? And a job is pretty important nowadays. I mean, I think I was reading the other day that like 5 million Americans have lost their insurance due to COVID-19. And, I have a family, I have health insurance. So losing a job is a big deal. So if Facebook, you could get terminated pretty easily. Even just by having your phone, if you left your phone in your pocket and you walked onto the production floor, that was immediate termination.
Why?
Because I don't know why they can, like it was a paperless facility, so they just didn't allow phones at all. Like they had lockers for us, to protect their sensitive information, which didn't work out very well.
No, it didn't work out for them at all. So you had that first meeting with HR, you got your reprimand, you kind of went around and contacted a bunch of people, and it sounds like raised some hell. And then you had follow-up meeting number 2 with HR about, I'm just gonna beat this dead horse, sharing a link from the LA Times. You had follow-up meeting number 2, which not only had Natasha, but Natasha's superior, and it sounds like someone else was in that meeting too.
Yeah. And I even so I pushed back, and then they backpedaled and they said, okay, you didn't violate it because it was discriminatory in nature, we're advocating violence, but you still violate our AUP, our acceptable use policy. So like it's interesting because at that time the project was coming to a close, so I was trying to possibly transfer to another project within the company. So that damaged my chances because I had what's called like a corrective action. So I asked them, hey, can you reverse the corrective action entirely? And they're like, no, we can't. So that was my ask. Hey, this is BS. Reverse the whole corrective action. Like you're saying, I shared a link to an LA Times article that I was featured in. So she said that it was out of her hands because it went to HR compliance, like above her initially. That's probably BS as well.
No, it's all BS, yeah.
But like I said before, it's kind of ironic, and it's kind of, because I did raise hell. I mean, I don't know how many people I emailed, like in corporate, like the PR people, legal people, and so it kind of just blew up in their face. Now they're in national news because they didn't fix things. Yeah.
And HR people never feel like that's going to happen to them. And it always makes me laugh. Every time HR people really do shady nonsense like this and it blows up, I'm like, you had it coming. You had it coming, HR people. So Ryan, in the video, they talked about how, one of the HR ladies posited, like, you had applied for a couple of different jobs, and she said that she thought you were turned down from those jobs because you were white. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree, and I actually have a bachelor's degree in Spanish, and so I was working in the Spanish department, and a lot of my coworkers were pretty young. Like the average age there was probably like 25, to be honest, or lower. Mm-hmm. So it is a difficult. I mean, applying for promotion, it was kind of difficult to get that. So I applied, I believe, 2 or 3 times for a promotion. Excuse me. Apologize for that.
That's okay.
So I apologize for I apologize for a promotion. I applied for a promotion 2 or 3 times. And I applied also for the policy team. And the policy team are the ones who interface with the client on a regular basis. So maybe the fact that I didn't get that one was because they didn't want some conservative dude, interacting with Facebook. It's a possibility. Because they kind of knew that I was conservative. But yeah, it's something I didn't really see directly. I mean, I think my coworker might have been correct that because I was white, not necessarily, she thought it was mainly because I was white, not because of the conservative angle, but mainly because I was white. But yeah, when I went over to the North American side, as soon as people found out that I was conservative, people automatically assume that you're like a racist Trump supporter. So that's kind of the implied assumption.
I think that's one of the things that's just so distressing about this whole thing to me, more than anything else, is it is almost like and again, I for people who weren't here at the beginning, I mean, the content moderator job sounds like a really soul-sucking job. You have to look at lots of horrible things, and I can't imagine doing that all day. I think it would be my very definition of hell. But it desensitizes you after a while, and one of the things that really worries me is that it seems as though not only are they desensitized towards really awful things that no one should have to look at every day, but the people working these jobs have now made the link between Trump supporters and every bad thing that I have to see, and they're racist and they're Nazis, and that's simply just not the truth. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, that link, that's been one of the main tactics from the media since 2016 is to attack Trump supporters and label them as racist. So we saw posts on a continual basis from Facebook where they said, hey, Trump's giving a speech or going to South Africa. He's using this phrase as a dog whistle. Be on the lookout for hate speech from Trump or Trump supporters related to this. Or the whole Honduran migrant caravan. So that was huge. So they would say, hey, Trump's giving a speech about this migrant caravan. Be on the lookout for hate speech against illegal immigrants, or even about his State of the Union. Literally, they mentioned his State of the Union speech and they said, watch out for hate speech.
See, and this is bizarre to me because whether you like him or whether you don't, Trump is the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. People are going to talk about the things that he's saying for better or worse. And it sounds like they're essentially telling you to be on the lookout for any positive comments around anything Trump says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's very accurate. Trying to think of another example here. Anything related to him. We talked about earlier in the interview how Trump pumper, if you call someone a Trump pumper, that's allowed. So yeah, exaggeration of speech. So they specifically made an exception. So if you make a claim about sexual activity to someone, if you say, hey, Ryan, if I say on Facebook, Nick had sex with Lexi, that's a claim of sexual activity. So that's not allowed. Now, if you say to someone, get Trump's dick out of your mouth, like they call that an exaggeration of speech. So you don't literally have Trump's dick in your mouth. it's an exaggeration of speech, right? Which is accurate linguistically. So that allowed greater discourse. So it would allow discourse on either side. So even if I said "get Biden's dick out of your mouth," that would be allowed. But they can kind of fashion the policy based on what's trending and what the attacks are. So we talked about earlier in the interview, if I call someone a Trump pumper, it stays up, it's allowed. But if you call someone a snowflake and that person reports it, it gets taken down. So depending on, that's why they want to know what's trending and what's going on, so that they can kind of fashion their policy in order to favor liberals. And this whole thing started after 2016. So Facebook, before 2016, did a lot of the content moderation for posts in the US in other countries. But in 2017, like Cognizant started the contract with Facebook to do content moderation, to do onshore things, like have onshore workers who have more knowledge about the culture and the politics. And I talked about, so that's something that I think is really insightful. And I talked to my coworkers about, hey, why do they go to the great expense? It's expensive to hire people in the US. Why do they do that? Go through that process to bring people to the US to moderate content? And the reason they gave was, well, because of the Russian foreign interference in 2016. So if you look at it holistically and you step back and look at what's going on, it really was a push from Facebook. Facebook was basically like, hey, we messed up we effed up in 2016. We better fix things. And you do that by having insights into what's going on. So I've raised up the Ukraine whistleblower. I won't say his name.
Yeah, we can't say his name. I've actually experimented with posting his name and only his name in a Facebook post and gone like that.
Yeah. So yeah, like that I raised up. That was trending at one point. So we actually made the decision to take it down, and we got guidance from Facebook that confirmed it. But yeah, Boogaloo was trending. They actually gave me direct guidance to, when I was on the Spanish side, they said, we want you to flag any examples of right-wing extremism you see. So they want to know what's going on the ground level. What are people talking about? What's the chatter going on at Facebook, so that they can maybe, when I didn't see this, but maybe at a higher level, they can look for those keywords or what's trending and try to shape the conversation.
Ryan, were you happy with how Project Veritas portrayed your story?
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. I don't like playing the race card at all, and it's not like part of. Obviously, I'm white or Caucasian or however you want to call it, but it's never really been part of. Like I don't like playing that as being a victim at all, because a lot of my who I am and what I've accomplished is due to my work ethic. And like in my ebook that I published recently called 30 Jobs in 30 Years, I've literally had like all these little odd jobs, and I've worked hard through college and had side jobs pretty much my entire life. So, but I think I really liked how they portrayed me in the video. I think the interview went really well. Like I said, it was only one take. We didn't do like a bunch of retakes or anything. But yeah, they highlighted, I think, the fact that I was targeted because I was conservative. Of course, as the person who is filming it, there's always things that you film that think should be in the video, but don't make it to the final cut. But no, I'm really happy with how I was treated. And I met James O'Keefe. He's a great guy. I had a lot of support from their entire team throughout the process.
Mm-hmm. And have you received any blowback from your participation in it?
Mainly luckily I haven't had any like crazy people, like random people reach out to me, but I had some coworkers who reached out to me, and texted me, mainly because there was one person in the video who was actually trying to assassinate Trump, essentially. So she wanted to accept the $80 million bounty from Iran. And so I guess I later learned she got some death threats on Facebook. So some of my coworkers were attacking me because they're like, do you know that Cassie's getting death threats? And so obviously I don't wish death threats on anybody, But the only thing I can say is like, if you were in any other country and you said the same thing, you'd probably get a little bit more than just a visit from Secret Service.
Well, right, exactly. It's like it always amuses me when people who do stuff like that, they all of a sudden get upset at the blowback that they get. You know, I have a well, okay, I'll tell my story really quick and then we can kind of wrap up. So I have an old lefty friend that I wouldn't really call her a friend, but I posted like a t-shirt design on Twitter that had nothing to do with race at all, and she came back and called me a racist on Twitter, and then all of my followers on Twitter went after her and was like, what do you mean? And like, I had so many people reach out to me saying, Carlin, why don't you defend her and tell your followers to stop? I was like, she called me a racist, what do you want?
Yeah.
But that stuff happens all the time. But I mean, listen, if that's the worst that's happened, I think you got off pretty well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple, text messages from coworkers where they're like, calling me a snake and attacking me for setting up a GoFundMe. But there's been a lot of positive support. I mean, the worst part about it is I think the privacy issue. So my name's out there now, like I could get doxxed. So there is always that risk. And I take steps, to ensure my safety and, as far as self-defense and everything like that. And yes. I do live in Arizona, which is nice. But I'll just share some kind of a nice comment from someone in Ireland. He said, Ryan Hartwig, well done, mate. You're a legend in my book. Old school, honorable, big brass, well polished, shiny AF balls. If I had a company, you'd be working in it. Fair play from Ireland, my brother. Stay safe and prosper. So, I mean, there's been a lot of positive support, like on Twitter and whatnot. But, it's never easy going public. It's been 3 weeks now. It's been 20 plus media appearances in the last 3 weeks. The first day was pretty nuts. So yeah, there's always some risks and some negative things associated with inadvertent publicity and putting your name out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you for going public, Ryan. And I know so many people in the chat have already said over and over again that you're brave, that they really appreciate what you did. And so you have lots of people that have your back and are in your corner. And guys, please make sure you follow Ryan on Twitter. And Ryan, where can people connect with you? What's the best place for them to go?
Yeah. So I think the best place is probably like my blog, ryanhartwig.org. Mm-hmm. So there's different tabs. There's a link there to the GoFundMe. There's a list of all my media appearances. If you want to see some of the interviews I've done I did one in Spain, one in Brazil, one in Canada. You can see those interviews there. But yeah, ryanhartwig.org is probably the best place to keep up.
Awesome. And I will make sure that's linked in the description below. I also, again, guys, I link to the Project Veritas stuff. I also link to an article that Ryan wrote. I think that all of this is fascinating, and it's very important for all of us to understand what's going on with big tech and how they're working with different types of content and what they're doing. So I'm very grateful that you came and spent an hour and a half with us today to explain it. And I'm sure we could have gone another hour and a half, and maybe sometime in the future we will, who knows. But guys, if you enjoyed this, please make sure you hit that thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you're not already. If you think you're subscribed, just go ahead and double check that, because YouTube is going to be YouTube, and you never know. But Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, and I know we all really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carlin. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. I have one more live stream coming up this week for everyone in the chat, and that is going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow with my friend Dr. Howard Asher, and we are going to be doing an update on Trump derangement syndrome. And Howard actually called me on Friday and said, Carlin, I've been hearing from so many people who are waking up from Trump derangement syndrome. And I was like, Howard, we got to do a live stream and talk about it. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And I hope to see many of you there. And in the meantime, take care, guys. And yeah, we'll be back at you soon.